My name is Iris Holt, and at 34, I learned the truth about the night my grandmother died. I drove 5 hours to get there. 5 hours of open highway through Southern Virginia, with Nana Evelyn's brass drafting compass sitting in the passenger seat like a quiet witness. It weighed almost nothing. It carried everything. My mother was turning 65. She was throwing herself a garden party at the old house, the one with the long gravel driveway my sister and I used to race down when we were kids. Ruth Calloway, my grandmother's oldest friend, had called me 3 weeks earlier. Her voice was careful. "Your grandmother would have wanted you there for this," she said. "And I have something for you, Iris, when the moment's right." I hadn't been home in 7 years. 7 years of silence. 7 years of my family telling this town I was the kind of woman who took advantage of a dying old lady and disappeared when there was nothing left. I pulled up the driveway at 4 in the afternoon. There were 30-some guests on the back lawn. White tablecloths. Hydrangeas in bloom. My mother, Diane Holt, was holding court with a glass of Pinot Grigio. My sister Brooke was laughing too loudly near the flower beds. My father, Tom, was nodding along to whatever someone's husband was saying about the county fair. I stepped out of the car. Not one of them looked up. But what my mother had kept from me for 7 years was waiting at that party. And so was the only person still willing to say it out loud. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where ordinary people set quiet boundaries that change everything. Here, dignity always outlasts cruelty. And the truth has a way of arriving exactly on time. Drop a comment, and be sure to subscribe. I walked across the lawn with my hands loose at my sides. A few guests glanced over. One woman, I think she worked at the bank, gave me a polite smile, the kind you offer someone you can't quite place. Diane saw me first. She was in the middle of a story, gesturing with her wine glass like a conductor's baton. Her eyes landed on mine, held for exactly 1 second, then moved right back to her audience. She didn't stop talking. She didn't say hello. She adjusted her silk scarf and laughed at something a guest said as if I hadn't just driven 300 miles to stand in her yard. Brooke noticed next. She was 36 now, wearing a cream linen dress and a thin gold necklace I'd never seen before. She looked good. She looked like she'd spent years practicing how to look good. Her smile thinned the moment she saw me. "Oh," she said after a pause. "You came." 2 words. No hug. No surprise. No warmth. Just the verbal equivalent of finding a stain on a tablecloth. My father stood near the grill with Hal Brennan, a contractor everybody in town seemed to know. Dad caught my eye from across the lawn and gave me a short, tight nod, like he was acknowledging a neighbor he owed money to. Then he turned back to Hal and kept talking. Aunt Carol appeared out of nowhere. She kissed both my cheeks, held me at arm's length, and said loudly enough for the next table to hear. Bless her heart, she actually showed up. I'd been home for less than a minute. Nobody asked where I'd been. Nobody asked what I did for a living. Nobody asked me anything at all. It happened near the dessert table. I had picked up a plate of lemon bars because standing near food gives you something to do with your hands when nobody talks to you. I was halfway through my second one when Brooke walked over with 2 women I didn't recognize. "Iris, you remember Karen and Dawn from the Junior League?" I didn't, but I smiled anyway. "Nice to see you both." Karen tilted her head. "And what are you up to these days?" Before I could answer, Brooke cut in. Her voice was bright and cheerful, the tone of someone delivering a line she'd rehearsed. "Still broke, still alone, still pointless." She said it like it was a joke. Then she laughed. A short, performative little breath. Karen and Dawn did that thing people do when they know they've just witnessed something ugly, but don't know whether they're supposed to react. Across the lawn, my mother heard it. Diane lifted her glass of Pinot Grigio and laughed into her wine. The sound carried. Still broke, still alone, still pointless. I set down the lemon bar. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't clench my jaw. I had spent 7 years learning not to react to things designed to make me react. And if there is one skill I have perfected, it is standing still while someone tries to knock me over. It's good to see you too, Brooke, I said. She blinked. That wasn't the script. She had expected tears, or anger, or some stammered defense she could carry to the next circle of guests like a trophy. Instead, she got a woman holding a plate of lemon bars with steady hands and a face that gave her nothing. I didn't flinch. Flinching was what they were waiting for. Here is what the town of Millhaven, Virginia, believed about me. They believed I had swooped back into my grandmother's life during her last months, charmed my way close to her while she was confused and frail, and disappeared the night she died without even staying for the funeral reception. They believed I had taken something. Nobody could ever say exactly what. They believed I left my mother to clean up the mess. They believed Diane was the devoted daughter, the one who held Evelyn's hand at the end, the one who arranged the lilies on the casket, wrote the obituary, and sat in the front pew looking like grief had made her elegant. They believed all of this because my Aunt Carol had spent 7 years making sure they did. Carol was 60 now, and she had built her social life the way some women build mood boards, one carefully curated story at a time. She ran the gossip loop in Millhaven like a regional franchise. She decided who was sympathetic, who was selfish, who had suffered nobly, and who had failed in public. Once Carol made the call, the town followed. She had decided I was selfish. I moved through the party like someone visiting an exhibit about her own disappearance. Poor Diane, I heard one neighbor whisper. After everything with that girl. Another murmured. A woman near the roses looked at me with that expression people reserve for stray dogs in nice neighborhoods. Half curiosity, half pity. I carried every glance like a small stone in my pocket. Each one weighed almost nothing. Together, they were heavy enough to drown in. But here's what Carol and Diane and every whispering guest at that party didn't know. I hadn't left because I wanted to. I left because my mother told me a lie so clean and so cruel it took 7 years and 1 letter to undo it. 7 years earlier, I was 27 and working my first real engineering job in Roanoke when Nana Evelyn got sick. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 3. The doctors gave her 4 to 8 months. I came home immediately. I cooked for her. I drove her to chemo in Lynchburg, 45 minutes each way, 3 times a week. I read to her from the old drafting manuals she loved, the ones from the 1950s with her pencil notes in the margins and little diagrams she'd drawn herself back, when women weren't supposed to know how load-bearing walls worked. I slept on the daybed in her study for 3 months. Diane came by on Sundays. Brooke sent flowers once. Tom mowed the lawn. On a Tuesday in October, Nana had a bad night. I stayed up with her until 2 in the morning, then finally fell asleep in the chair beside her bed. At 6 my mother called. Go home, Iris. Get some rest. I'm coming over to sit with her. So I drove back to the main house. I showered. I lay down for 2 hours. When I woke up and called the house phone, Diane answered on the first ring. She's gone, she said. She passed about an hour ago. I couldn't speak. It was peaceful, my mother said. Her voice was smooth and flat, like a lake with something underneath it. Just family at the end. I drove back. I ran up the porch steps. I tried to go into the bedroom, and Diane stepped into the doorway, blocking it. She looked at me the way you look at a dog that tracked mud into the house. She didn't want you there, Iris, she said. I was protecting her. That sentence lived inside me for 7 years like a bone that never set right. Nana Evelyn had been a draftswoman. Not officially, of course. Women in 1962 didn't get that title. She worked for a civil engineering firm in Richmond as a clerical assistant, which meant she redrew half their blueprints and never saw her name on a single one. She told me those stories the way other grandmothers told fairy tales, with patience, a little humor, and the quiet understanding that the ending was never fair. When I was 12, she gave me her brass drafting compass. It was heavy for its size, warm-colored, with a hinge that moved like silk. She kept it in a little leather case lined with green felt. This is the only tool that ever had my initials on it, she told me, turning it so I could see the tiny YH scratched into the base. I want you to put yours next to mine. I never did. It felt too sacred to mark. That compass became the thing I reached for whenever the world tilted. Through college. Through my first job. Through the night I packed a bag and left Millhaven with nothing but my car and a box of books. The compass sat in whatever drawer, pocket, or glove compartment was closest. It was the size of a house key. It steadied me the way a keel steadies a boat. Brooke had wanted it. I still remember her face the day Nana handed it to me. I was 12, she was 14, and the expression that crossed Brooke's face was sharp and still. The look of someone doing math and not liking the answer. She never said anything. She didn't have to. The ledger started that afternoon. Nana told me something else that year too. We were sitting on the porch with sweet tea and a pencil tucked behind her ear. You don't owe them the proof, Iris. I was 12. I didn't understand. I do now. Back at the party, I leaned against the porch railing and watched the lawn like a woman with nowhere better to be. The truth, something nobody at that party was going to hear from me yet, was that I had spent the last 6 years building a structural engineering firm called Holt & Ridge out of a 2-room office in Charlottesville. We started with residential inspections, then small restorations, then municipal contracts. 18 months earlier, we won the contract for the Millhaven River Mill restoration, the biggest historic renovation in the county's history. $3.4 million. 14 months of work. The project the entire town had been buzzing about for a year. My company, my designs, my name on the contract. But here, at this party, I was still the girl who took advantage of her dying grandmother and vanished. I let them think that. Nana had taught me why. Years ago, driving past the Mercedes dealership on Route 29, she slowed just enough for the sunlight to slide across the hoods. You'll have one someday, Iris, she said. And when you do, you won't drive it here to show them. You'll drive it because you earned the quiet. I was earning the quiet right then. The midnight blue Mercedes sedan I had parked at the bottom of the long gravel driveway, half hidden behind the catering van and the old magnolia tree, cost more than my mother's annual fundraising goal for the Millhaven Community Foundation. Nobody had noticed it yet. Nobody was looking. That was fine. I hadn't come back for the car. I hadn't come back to prove anything. I came because Ruth had asked me to. And because the woman who raised me deserved at least one person at that party who remembered her honestly. Ruth Calloway found me on the porch at 5:15, right when the light started turning gold. She was 86 years old, 5'2", and she walked like a woman who had never once been in a hurry and had never once been late. Her white hair was pinned up. She wore a navy cardigan with brass buttons that looked older than I was. In her hands, she carried a small clutch purse close to her body, like it held something that mattered. "There you are," she said. Then she hugged me. Not an air kiss, not a social gesture, a real hug. Arms around my shoulders, one hand at the back of my head. The way Nana used to hold me when I was little. Nobody else at that party had touched me. "I'm glad you came," she said, pulling back to study my face with those sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "You look more like her every year." "Thank you for calling me Ruth." She patted my arm. "Your grandmother would have wanted you here." Then she looked across the lawn. At Diane holding court by the hydrangeas. At Brooke refilling wine glasses with the attentive little performance of a daughter who needed witnesses. Something tightened in Ruth's face. A look passed over her. The expression of a woman who had kept a promise long enough and was getting tired of waiting. "I have something for you," she said quietly. "When the moment's right." She squeezed my hand once and walked back toward the lawn. I watched her stop at the dessert table and pick up a plate as if nothing had happened. 86 years old, and still the best poker face in Millhaven. Whatever Ruth was holding had waited 7 years. It could wait a little longer. But I had a feeling it wouldn't have to. By 6 o'clock, the party had settled into its rhythm. Someone plugged in the string lights. Soft jazz drifted from a speaker near the back door. Diane moved through clusters of guests like a gallery hostess, touching elbows, laughing on cue, managing everyone's impression of everything. I sat at a table near the fence with a glass of water and watched my family perform. Brooke was telling a group of guests about the River Mill restoration, the project she kept calling our town's crown jewel. She used words like revitalization and heritage preservation, and the guests nodded, impressed. Brooke's husband Chad had apparently joined the advisory committee. Diane had hosted 2 fundraising luncheons for it. Tom had donated lumber from his hardware store. The Holt name was all over that project. Just not the right Holt. A woman named Donna from the school board leaned toward me. "And what do you do, sweetheart?" Diane materialized beside me before I could answer. She rested a hand on my shoulder, the first time she had touched me all evening, and said with a gentle smile, "Iris is still finding her path. We're all rooting for her." The table nodded sympathetically. Donna patted my arm. Diane floated away, still finding her path. I had found my path at 28. I had paved it myself. If you've ever walked back into a room that decided who you were years ago and chosen not to collapse under it, then you already understand this story. Stay with me. The quietest part is still coming. And if this is hitting home, take a second to subscribe. The questions kept coming over the next hour, the way questions do in small towns where everyone has an opinion and nobody has boundaries. Every time someone asked me something, someone in my family answered for me. Hal Brennan asked what field I was in. Tom jumped in. "She's doing some work in the city. Office stuff." He said it the way people describe a hobby they don't respect. Peggy asked if I was married. Carol answered that one loudly enough for the next table to hear. Our Iris is the independent type. When the pastor's wife, Linda, gently asked if I'd found someone special, Brooke appeared with a fresh glass of wine and said, "Some people are better solo, Linda. Trust me." Each answer was a wall built around me. Not brick. Something softer. Cotton and condescension. The kind of wall you don't notice until you realize you can't move. I let them build. Every wall they raised was one more thing they'd have to explain later. At 7:15, I excused myself and went inside to use the bathroom. On the way down the hall, I passed the closed door to Nana's study, the room where she taught me to read blueprints. The room where the compass used to sit in its leather case on the second shelf. The door was shut. A coat rack stood in front of it like a sentry. I touched the knob. It was cold. Then I turned it. The study was gone. Not remodeled. Erased. Where Nana's drafting table had stood for 30 years, there was now a treadmill. The bookshelves that had once held engineering manuals, pencil cups, and framed photos of bridges she admired had been replaced by white shelving stacked with yoga mats and resistance bands. Inside the closet, I spotted 2 cardboard boxes shoved into the corner, labeled in Diane's handwriting. Evelyn Miscellaneous. 30 years of draftsmanship boxed up like old receipts. The green felt case the compass had once rested in was gone. The smell of cedar and old paper was gone too. The room smelled like lavender air freshener now. Diane had turned it into a home gym. I stood in the doorway for 10 full seconds and let the room tell me everything I needed to know. Evelyn Holt, who drew load calculations in the margins of library books, who sketched bridge trusses on napkins, who fought for every inch of professional respect in a world that gave women none, had been reduced to a label and a storage bin. My hand went to the compass in my jacket pocket. The brass was warm from my body heat. I pressed my thumb against the hinge where the initials were scratched and felt my anger rise. Not a flood. A slow, clean pressure, like water building behind a dam. I let it settle. Anger was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not here. Not yet. The compass was proof she had existed. That room was proof they wanted her forgotten. I closed the door and walked back down the hall with my shoulders straight and my face blank. Nobody noticed I had been gone. Nobody noticed anything about me. As it turned out, that was exactly the advantage I needed. I sat back down. Across the lawn, Ruth caught my eye and gave me the smallest nod. Almost time. My father found me alone near the drink station at 7:30. The sun was low now, that golden hour light that makes everything look warmer than it is. Tom Holt was 66. He had the build of a man who had spent 40 years lifting lumber, and the posture of a man who had spent the same 40 years trying not to be noticed. He poured himself a lemonade and stood next to me without looking directly at me. "Long drive," he said. 5 hours. Roads clear. Mostly. We stood there in silence. The jazz shifted to something with a trumpet. Across the lawn, Diane was organizing a group photo. "Your grandmother," Tom began. He stared into his lemonade. "She would have liked you being here." Something cracked behind his voice. Thin. Fragile. The sound a branch makes just before it breaks. I waited. I wanted him to say more. I wanted him to say he was sorry, or that he knew, or that he should have called. But before he could, Diane's voice sliced across the lawn. Tom, get over here for the photo. Bring your glass. He flinched. It was tiny. A jaw twitch. Less than a second. Then he straightened up, picked up his drink, and walked toward her without finishing the sentence. That was my father. He had spent 7 years starting truths he never finished. He had walked away from almost confessions for so long that the walking had become the truth. At 8 o'clock, the sky had gone lavender. Someone lit the citronella candles. Smoke curled through the air like punctuation. Brooke had had 3 glasses of wine by then, and her performance was starting to slip. She stood in the middle of a circle of women, raised her glass and said, I just want to say something about Mom. The group quieted. 65 years of being the backbone of this family, Brooke said. 65 years of holding us together, especially after we lost Nana. Her voice caught, perfectly timed, just enough tremor. Mom was the one who carried us. The one who stayed. Then she looked directly at me. Every woman in the circle followed her gaze. Some of us stayed, Brooke said, smiling. And some of us didn't. A beat. But tonight isn't about what's missing. Tonight is about what's here. A few people clapped. Carol dabbed her eyes. Diane pressed a hand to her chest and mouthed, Thank you. I sat still. I held my water glass with both hands, and felt the condensation drip between my fingers. The message was clear. I was the absence. I was the disloyal daughter. I was the one who left while Diane stayed and held everything together. 30 guests heard it. 30 guests accepted it. The narrative had been reinforced for 7 years, and Brooke had just lacquered it in front of everyone who mattered. Ruth was watching from the far side of the lawn. She set down her plate very slowly. Even from 30 feet away, I could read the look on her face. Now. She found me by the fence 5 minutes later. The party noise hummed behind us. The sky was darkening. Without a word, she opened her navy clutch and pulled out an envelope. Yellowed. Soft at the corners. The kind of paper that has been touched carefully, over and over. Nana Evelyn's handwriting was on the front in blue ink. For Iris, when she's ready. She gave this to me the week before she died, Ruth said. She knew. I took the envelope. It weighed nothing. It weighed everything. She asked for you every day that last week, Ruth said. Every single day. She kept saying, Where is Iris? Tell Iris to come. And your mother told her you didn't want to be there. Told her you were too busy. Told her you said it was too hard to watch. I stopped breathing. And Diane told you the opposite, didn't she? Ruth asked gently. That your grandmother didn't want to see you. I nodded. My throat had closed. She lied to both of you, Ruth said. She kept you apart at the very end, and then she built a story around it. Her jaw tightened. I was there 3 of those last 5 days. Your grandmother died asking for you, and your mother let her believe you didn't care. I opened the letter. Nana's handwriting was smaller than I remembered. Unsteady but legible. I read one line, then another, then a third. And the world I had been living in for 7 years folded in on itself like paper. The last line read, You don't owe them the proof. Just come home free of them. I folded the letter and slid it into my jacket beside the compass. I looked at Ruth. She's going to give a toast soon, I said. Ruth nodded once. I'll be right there. I walked to the far end of the driveway where the gravel met the road. Nobody followed me. The compass was in my left pocket. The letter was in my right. 7 years of guilt sat between them. 7 years of believing I had abandoned my grandmother. 7 years of replaying that phone call in my head. Go home, Iris. Get some rest. 7 years of hating myself for listening. 7 years of wondering if Nana had called my name at the end. And if she had died disappointed in me. She had called my name. She had called it every day. And my mother had answered every call with a lie so practiced it sounded like mercy. I let that settle into me. Not all at once. Slowly. The way cold settles into a house when the heat goes out. I didn't cry. Crying would have been easier. What I felt was harder than grief and quieter than rage. It was clarity. The kind that comes after years of being lost when someone finally hands you a map and says, "You were never on the wrong road." Someone moved the signs. I could have left then, gotten in my car, driven 5 hours back to Charlottesville, and never spoken to any of them again. Nana's letter gave me permission to do exactly that. Come home free of them. But free didn't mean silent. Free meant choosing what to do with the truth instead of hiding from it. Nana had been a woman who drew straight lines in rooms that told her she wasn't allowed to hold the pencil. She never fought loudly. She just showed up with the right answer and let the room catch up. I was her granddaughter. I knew what to do. By 9 o'clock, the candles were burning low. Someone had switched the music from jazz to acoustic guitar. The kind of playlist that signals speeches and sentiment. I sat near the edge of the main table, close enough to hear, far enough away that nobody felt required to include me. Diane was telling a story to Linda, the pastor's wife, and 2 women from the garden club. "Those last days were so peaceful," Diane said, touching her collarbone. "It was just family at the end. Mom and I holding hands. She squeezed my fingers right before she went. I'll never forget it." "What a blessing," Linda said softly. "It really was," Diane answered, dabbing at the corner of an eye that was completely dry. "I'm just grateful I could be there for her." I sat 12 feet away and heard every word. A week earlier, those words would have hollowed me out with guilt. Now they made me feel something worse. Certain that Diane had told this version so many times, she believed it herself. Certain that the story she'd built was load-bearing. Pull it out, and everything above it would collapse. I found Ruth sitting at the edge of the lawn with her purse in her lap, and the kind of patience that only comes from being old enough to know most things arrive when they're meant to. "She's going to say it again," I told her. "The peaceful ending. Just family. The whole story." "She's been saying it for 7 years, Ruth said. "If I stand up and call it a lie, they'll say I'm the bitter daughter who came back to ruin a birthday party." "They might," Ruth said. "But if you speak, I'll tell them what I saw." I looked at her. "I was there, Iris," she said simply. "I heard your grandmother ask for you until she couldn't ask anymore. I can tell every person at this party exactly what happened, but only if you want me to." I thought about Nana's letter. "You don't owe them the proof. Just come home free of them." But that line had been written for a granddaughter who still thought she was the one who had failed. Now I knew better. And freedom, real freedom, wasn't walking away from a lie. It was standing in the same room as the liar, and letting the truth breathe. "I want them to hear it," I said. Ruth squeezed my hand. "Then they will." I walked toward the front of the house. The magnolia at the edge of the driveway was backlit by the porch light, and beyond it, parked in the glow, was my car. Nobody had really noticed it yet. They were about to. There's a moment in every quiet person's life when staying silent stops being strength and starts being permission. I had just reached mine. If you've reached yours too, comment truth below. And let's keep going. At 9:15, the speeches were coming. You could feel it in the air. Diane had gone inside to freshen up. Brooke was arranging the cake table. Tom was fiddling with the speaker. I stepped toward the front of the property. The house sat on 2.5 acres. Most of it stretched behind the house, but the front was all driveway, 160 feet of pale gravel lined with boxwoods, and ending in a wide turnaround near the road. A few guests had drifted forward. Some were smoking. A couple was pointing out early stars. Someone's teenager was perched on the stone wall scrolling on her phone. My car sat in the pool of light beyond the magnolia. Midnight blue Mercedes S-Class. Current model. Virginia plates. The kind of car that doesn't shout. It just waits for you to look. I hadn't parked it there for drama. It was simply the only spot available when I arrived. But now in the evening light, with the string lights reflecting off the hood and 30 guests 20 feet away, it looked like an answer to a question nobody had thought to ask. Hal Brennan noticed it first. He was standing near the boxwoods with a beer when he stopped mid-sentence and tilted his head. "Whose S-Class is that?" Nobody answered. I was standing 10 feet away, keys in my hand, the brass compass warm against my thigh. 3 things happened in the next minute. First, Hal walked closer. He circled the car the way builders circle anything well-made, slowly, respectfully, cataloging the details. Then he straightened and looked at me. This yours? It is. Second, Brooke came around the side of the house carrying a tray of champagne flutes. She saw the car, saw Hal looking at me, and the tray dipped just enough for the glasses to clink hard. Whose car is that? Someone asked.